Imagine this. The year is 1783. The smoke has cleared from the battlefields of the American Revolution. The last of the redcoats have sailed away, their ships disappearing over the horizon. A profound quiet settles over the land, a quiet filled not with peace, but with a deafening uncertainty. The impossible has happened. A small collection of colonies has stared down the mightiest empire on earth, and won. They are free, but what does freedom actually mean? For the farmers, merchants, and soldiers who had risked everything. This was the question that echoed in every town square and tavern. They had fought for liberty, for an escape from the tyranny of a distant king. But now, with the king gone, who would rule? Who would lead? Victory had brought independence, but it had also brought a terrifying, exhilarating, and deeply confusing void. Think about it. There was no United States as we know it today. There was no president, no Supreme Court, no Washington Don Código. There was just a loose, fragile alliance of 13 individual states, each one fiercely proud, deeply suspicious of the others, and terrified of creating a new central power that might become just as tyrannical as the one they had just overthrown. They called themselves the United States, and Congress assembled. But in reality, they were more like 13 separate countries, each with its own government, its own currency, and its own ambitions. The document that was supposed to hold them all together was the Articles of Confederation. It was, to put it mildly, a mess. The Articles created a national government so weak, it was practically powerless. It could declare war, but it couldn't raise an army. It could borrow money, but it couldn't raise taxes to pay it back. It couldn't even regulate trade between the states. Imagine trying to run a business where your neighbor could just slap a massive tax on your goods for no reason. That was the reality. Virginia was in a trade war with Maryland. New York was taxing firewood from Connecticut. It was economic chaos, and this wasn't just some abstract political problem. It was hitting ordinary people hard. Soldiers who had fought for years, leaving their farms and families behind, were given IOUs from a government that had no money to pay them. These were worthless pieces of paper. They returned home, many of them wounded, to find themselves in crushing debt, facing foreclosure on the very land they had fought to protect. The dream of liberty was quickly turning into a nightmare of poverty and despair. One of the most powerful voices of the time, George Washington, had retired to his home at Mount Vernon. He thought his service to the country was over, but he watched this unfolding crisis with growing alarm. He wrote letters, filled with frustration and dread. "We are one nation today, and 13 tomorrow," he lamented. He saw the potential for everything they had fought for to unravel, to collapse into anarchy or be picked apart by European powers, just waiting for them to fail. He feared the grand experiment of American democracy was on the verge of becoming a cautionary tale, a laughingstock on the world stage. This was the critical moment. The revolution had been won, but the nation was yet to be born. The air was thick with questions. Were they Americans first, or Virginians, or New Yorkers? Could a government truly derive its power from the people without descending into mob rule? Could 13 squabbling states ever agree on anything? The victory against Britain was just the first act. The real battle, the battle for the soul of a nation, was just beginning. It was a fight not with muskets and cannons, but with ideas, compromises, and a desperate search for a new way forward. The world watched, holding its breath. Would this fledgling nation, born in the fire of revolution, soar to greatness, or crumble back into the dust of history? The next few years would provide the answer. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back in time. If you found this as fascinating as I do, please hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. We have so much more of this incredible story to uncover, and you won't want to miss what happens next. Ring that notification bell, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Hey everyone! Welcome back to the channel. If you're just tuning in, you're recatching us right in the heart of our journey through some of history's most pivotal moments. Last time, we set the stage, painting a picture of a nation yearning for freedom, a simmering rebellion about to boil over. But every great story, every revolution, needs a leader, a central figure to rally behind. And today, we're finally going to meet him. Forget the marble statues for a moment. Forget the idealized portraits we often see, because today, we're introducing you to George Washington, a man, not just the myth. It's chapter 2, and our hero emerges. Now, when you think of Washington, maybe you picture him crossing the Delaware, or perhaps standing stoically, sword in hand. And yes, those moments are iconic for a reason. But what if I told you that the real hero wasn't always shiny and perfect? What if I told you he was often weary, constantly battling not just the British, but also dissent, desertion, and despair within his own ranks? Because that, my friends, is the more compelling truth. George Washington wasn't born into a life of ease. He was a Virginia planter, a surveyor, a man who understood the land and had seen military service in the French and Indian War, learning harsh lessons along the way. When the Continental Congress convened, searching for a commander-in-chief, they needed someone who embodied a specific set of qualities, a Virginian to help unite the colonies, a man with some military experience, and crucially, someone who could command respect. Washington, tall, dignified, and known for his integrity, fit the bill. But being chosen was just the beginning of his impossible task. Imagine being handed command of a ragtag army, farmers, shopkeepers, blacksmiths, all volunteers, poorly trained, poorly equipped, and with limited supplies. Their enthusiasm was high, yes, but experience was scarce, and discipline was a concept many were just starting to grasp. And across from them, the most powerful military force in the world, the British Army, seasoned veterans, well-supplied, and backed by a formidable navy. The odds were, frankly, astronomical. Washington took the reins in Cambridge, Massachusetts, in 1775, and what he inherited was less an army and more a collection of militia. His first monumental challenge wasn't a grand battle, but simply shaping this disparate group into a cohesive fighting force. He had to instill discipline, establish supply lines from scratch, and create a chain of command. This was a man learning on the job, under immense pressure, with the fate of a nascent nation resting squarely on his shoulders. His early days were a masterclass in resilience. Faced with overwhelming British strength, he often had to make difficult, strategic retreats, conserving his meager forces for another day. These weren't always popular decisions, and sometimes they were criticized as cowardly, but Washington understood something vital. The survival of the army was the survival of the revolution. If the army was destroyed, all was lost. Picture the winter at Valley Forge. It's not just a footnote in history. It's a testament to the sheer fortitude required to lead this revolution. Thousands of soldiers, freezing, starving, battling disease, deserted. Morale plummeted. Yet, Washington remained. He shared in their hardships, though perhaps not to the same degree, and his presence, his unwavering commitment, was a powerful symbol. He wrote letter after letter, pleading with Congress for supplies, for pay for his men, for support. He was a general, yes, but also a persistent advocate, a weary diplomat, and a tireless administrator. He wasn't a brilliant tactician like some European generals of the era. He made mistakes, learned from setbacks, and sometimes luck played a significant role. But what he possessed in abundance was an indomitable spirit and an uncanny ability to hold things together when they seemed on the verge of collapse. He had a deep sense of civic duty, a profound commitment to the Republican ideals the revolution sought to achieve. This wasn't about personal glory for him. It was about the principles of self-governance and liberty. Think about the sheer weight of responsibility. Every decision he made, every order he issued, impacted not just the lives of his soldiers, but the future of millions. He carried the hopes and fears of an entire continent. There were times when victory seemed impossible, when the vision of an independent America felt like a distant dream. But he never completely gave up. He adapted, he persevered, and he continued to inspire, even when he himself was exhausted. His leadership wasn't just about military prowess. It was about character. It was about earning trust in an era where trust was fragile. He navigated the treacherous waters of intercolonial rivalries, dealt with ambitious subordinates, and managed the often frustrating relationship with the Continental Congress. He was constantly putting out fires, both literal and metaphorical. So, when we talk about Chapter 2 and a hero emerging, we're not just talking about a general who won battles. We're talking about a man who, against all rational expectation, kept an army alive, kept a cause alive, and ultimately, through sheer will and unwavering dedication, guided a fledgling nation towards its independence. He was the anchor in a storm, the steady hand that prevented the ship from capsizing entirely. He embodied a quiet strength, a steadfast resolve that became the backbone of the American Revolution. He wasn't perfect. No human is. But his imperfections only make his achievements more extraordinary, more human, and more relatable. He was a leader who understood the struggles of his people because he often shared in them, albeit from a different vantage point. He was the weary but respected leader who, time and again, found a way forward when there seemed to be none. And that, my friends, is the George Washington we need to truly appreciate. Not just the legend. His journey is just beginning. And trust me, there's so much more to uncover about this extraordinary figure. What are your initial thoughts on this more humanized portrayal of Washington? Let me know in the comments below. If you're enjoying this historical deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with a friend, and do you forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you do miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a truly pivotal moment in American history. A moment often celebrated but perhaps not fully understood in its radical defiance of tradition. We're talking about the crownless victory. Chapter 3 of our journey through the untold stories of the American Revolution. The cannons had fallen silent. The treaties were signed after 8 long, brutal years. The impossible had happened. America had won its independence. Cheers erupted. Bells rang, and a collective sigh of relief swept across the newly formed nation. But in the midst of this euphoria, a new kind of tension began to simmer. A quiet, yet persistent, question started to echo through the taverns, the council chambers, and even among the weary soldiers preparing to return home. What now? For centuries, the accepted path after a great war, especially one led by a charismatic general, was clear. The victor, the liberator, the one who had steered the ship through the storm, would naturally assume the reins of ultimate power. Think Caesar, think Cromwell, think of countless figures throughout history who, after achieving military triumph, transitioned into supreme rule. And so, it was almost inevitable that whispers began to spread, growing louder with each passing day. Washington should be king. Yes, you heard that right. Mani Vilibed, quite earnestly, that George Washington, the stoic, unwavering commander-in-chief, should ascend to a throne. This wasn't some fringe idea. It was a sentiment held by a significant portion of the population, including some of his most trusted officers. To us, looking back through the lens of a firmly established republic, it might sound absurd. But put yourselves in their shoes for a moment. The fledgling United States was a radical experiment, an untested concept. Monarchy was the norm, the stable, predictable form of government across the globe. After years of chaos and uncertainty, many longed for stability, for a strong hand to guide them. They had just overthrown one king. Weren't they simply inviting another kind of chaos by attempting to govern themselves without a familiar, established structure? The Articles of Confederation, the country's first attempt at a constitution, were proving to be weak and ineffective, struggling to pay soldiers or even enforce laws. The future felt fragile, precarious. So, when prominent figures, including some of Washington's own officers, approached him with the suggestion of becoming a monarch, it wasn't out of malice or a desire to betray the revolution's ideals. It came from a genuine place of fear, uncertainty, and a deeply ingrained belief that a strong, central, hereditary leader was the only way to ensure the new nation's survival. They saw Washington, with his immense popularity, his proven leadership, and his moral authority, as the only figure capable of uniting such a diverse and disparate group of states. A king, they reasoned, would provide the necessary stability, command respect from other European powers, and prevent the new republic from fracturing under the weight of its own inexperience. The most famous of these overtures came in the form of a letter from Colonel Louis Nicola in May of 1782, as the war was winding down. Nicola, a respected officer, outlined the perceived failures of the Republican model and explicitly suggested that Washington assume monarchical power, even hinting at a title like king. He wasn't alone in this thinking. Many in the military felt disillusioned and resentful. Unpaid and unappreciated by Congress, they had sacrificed everything, and now they saw their new nation teetering on the brink of collapse, seemingly unable to govern itself. Imagine the pressure on Washington, the weight of expectations, the fervent belief that he alone could secure the future. He could have easily seized power. The army adored him. Many citizens admired him to the point of reverence, and the political system was in disarray. He had every opportunity to become what the world expected a victorious general to become: a ruler, a king. And honestly, it would have been understandable. The lure of absolute power, coupled with the conviction that it was for the good of the nation, must have been immense. But here's where Washington cemented his place as a truly extraordinary figure, not just in American history, but in world history. His response to Nicola's letter was swift, firm, and unequivocal. He was not just appalled by the suggestion. He was genuinely saddened that such an idea could even be contemplated by someone in his trusted circle. A.W.Wop, expressing his greatest astonishment and abhorrence at the proposal, viewing it as a grave threat to everything they had fought for. He called the idea big with mischief and warned of the ruin of his country. Washington understood that accepting a crown would betray the very principles of the Revolution: liberty, self-governance, and the idea that power derives from the people, not from divine right or military might. He recognized that the fight had not just been against British rule, but against the very concept of monarchy itself in America. To trade one king for another, even a beloved one, would render all their sacrifices meaningless. It would be a hollow victory. His refusal wasn't just a political statement. It was a deeply moral one. It demonstrated a profound commitment to the Republican ideal. Even when that ideal felt fragile and untested, it showed an incredible personal restraint and a true understanding of the historical moment. He could have chosen personal glory, but he chose something far greater: the enduring legacy of a self-governing people. This crownless victory was perhaps Washington's most crucial contribution to the American experiment. By stepping away from power, by unequivocally rejecting the crown, he set an indelible precedent. He demonstrated that leadership in America would not be about inherited power or military domination, but about service to a higher ideal. He established the principle of civilian control over the military, a cornerstone of American democracy. He showed the world that a nation could be founded on the consent of the governed, not on the decree of a monarch. When he later resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief in December 1783, returning his sword to Congress, it was a moment that sent shockwaves across the globe. Kings and emperors were astonished. For a general to voluntarily relinquish power, especially when he held so much authority and adoration, was virtually unheard of. It was an act of profound selflessness and an enduring testament to his commitment to the principles of the Revolution. This refusal to become king, this deliberate act of humility and devotion to democratic ideals, was more than just a historical anecdote. It shaped the very foundation of the United States. It solidified the notion that in America, no one is above the law, no one is entitled to perpetual power, and that even the greatest heroes must serve the Republic, not rule over it. It paved the way for a presidency, not a monarchy, and ensured that the power would ultimately reside with the people. So, the next time you think about the American Revolution, remember not just the battles fought and the independence won, but also this critical turning point. The moment when a nation's fate hung in the balance, and its greatest hero chose to walk away from a crown, thereby securing a truly crownless victory for generations to come. What are your thoughts on this incredible moment? Could you imagine an America with a King George Washington? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back. We're diving deep today into a truly pivotal moment in history. A moment where one man's choice could have completely reshaped the future of a nation. This is Chapter 4. The Temptation of Power. Imagine this. The smoke has cleared. The battles are won, and the American colonies have finally secured their independence. George Washington, the triumphant general, stands at the peak of his glory. He commands an army fiercely loyal to him. A nation adores him, and the path to absolute power is, frankly, wide open. He could have been king, emperor, dictator for life. Whatever he wished, the world had seen it happen countless times before. But Washington, he chose a different path. Think about it. History is full of victorious generals who, after achieving military success, couldn't resist the lure of ultimate control. Take Julius Caesar, for instance. After his astonishing military campaigns, he crossed the Rubicon, sparked a civil war, and ultimately became dictator of Rome. His ambition, while monumental, led him to seize and consolidate power, fundamentally altering the Roman Republic forever. Then there's Oliver Cromwell, a brilliant military leader during the English Civil War. He rose through the ranks, defeated the Royalists, and ultimately became Lord Protector of the Commonwealth of England. He effectively ruled as a military dictator, dissolving Parliament when it suited him, and maintaining power until his death. The transition from general to supreme leader was, for him, a natural progression. And of course, we can't forget Napoleon Bonaparte. Rising from a humble background, his military genius propelled him to the forefront of French politics. After a series of dazzling victories and a coup d'état, he crowned himself Emperor of the French. His reign, though transformative, was undeniably built on his military might and personal ambition to rule an empire. These were formidable figures, men of incredible capability and vision, but they all shared a common trajectory. Military success led directly to the seizure of political power. It was almost expected. The victorious general becomes the ruler. It's a pattern ingrained in human history, repeated across cultures and centuries. Now, let's bring it back to Washington. He had every reason, by a historical precedent, to do the same. His soldiers, many of whom had endured unimaginable hardship under his command, would have followed him anywhere. The fledgling nation, exhausted by war and craving stability, might have even welcomed a strong hand at the helm. The very concept of a republic, a government of the people, was still a radical experiment, prone to fragility. A powerful general could easily justify taking charge for the good of the nation. The weight of that choice, the sheer enormity of it, is almost impossible for us to fully grasp today. He wasn't just deciding his own future. He was deciding the future of American democracy, and perhaps even the future of republicanism itself. Would America follow the well-trodden path of military dictatorship, or would it forge a new one? He had seen firsthand the abuses of power under a monarchy, and he understood the profound dangers of unchecked authority. Every fiber of his being, every principle he stood for, was about something greater than personal gain or glory. He envisioned a nation where power flowed from the people, not from a single individual or an elite few. So, with all this historical context, with the whispers of King George undoubtedly reaching his ears, what did Washington do? He didn't march on the Capitol to declare himself emperor. He didn't consolidate his military control over civilian government. Instead, at the height of his influence, he made a decision that shocked the world and set an unprecedented example. He chose to step down. This wasn't just a simple resignation. It was a profound declaration. It was a conscious rejection of the very temptation that had consumed so many powerful leaders before him. He demonstrated that true leadership wasn't about holding on to power, but about upholding principles. It was about creating a system where power could be peacefully transferred, where civilian authority reigned supreme over military might. His act of yielding power, of returning to private life as a farmer, was a silent but thunderous statement. It signaled to the world that America would be different. It would not be built on the cult of personality or the iron fist of a general, but on the rule of law and the consent of the governed. This single decision, in many ways, solidified the very foundation of American democracy. It showed that it was possible for a victorious general to not seize the throne, to trust in the nascent institutions of a republic. It was a gamble, of course. The republic was young and vulnerable, But Washington's faith in the American experiment and his profound commitment to its ideals ultimately prevailed over the seductive siren song of absolute power. And that, my friends, is why his story continues to resonate, why his character remains an enduring beacon of selflessness and civic virtue. It's a testament to the idea that true strength lies not in taking power, but in relinquishing it for the greater good. What an incredible chapter in history, right? It really makes you think about the choices leaders face and the impact they have. If you found this dive into history as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button, share this video with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you soon. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a pivotal moment in American history. A chapter often overlooked, but absolutely crucial to understanding the birth of a nation. The Newburgh Conspiracy. Grab a snack, settle in, because this is a story of incredible tension, a nation on the brink, and one man's extraordinary leadership that saved it all. Imagine this. It's the spring of 1783. The American Revolutionary War is effectively over, but a formal peace treaty with Great Britain hasn't been signed yet. The Continental Army, the brave men who fought for independence, are camped in New York. They've endured years of brutal warfare, harsh winters, and unimaginable sacrifices. They've defeated the most powerful army in the world, but there's a problem, a huge problem. They haven't been paid. Not just a little late, but significantly behind on wages. And many officers were promised lifetime pensions that now seem very much in doubt. These weren't just common soldiers. These were officers, the backbone of the army, men who had led from the front, who had risked everything. Many had depleted their personal fortunes to support the cause, leaving their families impoverished. And now, with victory in sight, they felt betrayed. Their frustration simmered, then boiled over. They had dedicated their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to the cause, only to face an uncertain future. While Congress, struggling financially, seemed unwilling or unable to address their grievances, the air in Newburgh was thick with resentment. Some officers, fed up with what they saw as congressional indifference and ingratitude, began to organize. They felt that Congress had used them and was now ready to discard them. They saw a pattern of broken promises. There was a growing sentiment, fanned by anonymous letters circulating through the camp, that the army should not disband until their demands were met. These letters, skillfully written and highly inflammatory, called for a meeting of officers to discuss their options. They suggested a radical course of action: either march on Congress and demand payment at sword point, or refuse to lay down their arms and retire until their grievances were redressed, thereby effectively threatening a military coup against the very government they had fought to establish. Now, this was an incredibly dangerous situation. If the army, the very instrument of American independence, turned against its own government, the newly formed United States would crumble before it even had a chance to stand. All the sacrifices, all the bloodshed, all the dreams of a free republic would be for nothing. The fledgling nation, born of revolution, risked dying by revolution from within. This was the moment of truth, a true test of the American experiment. George Washington, the commander-in-chief, learned of these secret meetings and the incendiary Newburgh addresses. He understood the gravity of the situation immediately. He knew the officers' anger was legitimate, their suffering real. But he also knew that any military action against the civilian government would be an unmitigated disaster, destroying the very principles they had fought for. He had to act. And he had to act fast, with immense wisdom and courage. Instead of ordering arrests or trying to quash the movement with force, Washington chose a different path. He condemned the anonymous letters, calling them subversive and dangerous. He then called for a general meeting of the officers on March 15, 1783, at the Temple of Virtue, a large log building used for services and gatherings in New. He knew he had to face them directly, to appeal to their better angels, to remind them of who they were and what they had fought for. The atmosphere in the Temple of Virtue was electric with tension. The officers gathered, many of them hardened veterans, their faces etched with anger and disillusionment. They were ready to stand their ground. Washington entered the hall, his presence commanding, yet somber. He began to read a prepared speech, acknowledging their grievances, expressing his sympathy for their suffering, and affirming his belief in their patriotism. He spoke of the distress, of the common danger, and of the common suffering they had endured together. He reminded them of the sacred trust they held, of the liberty they had won. But as he read, he struggled with the words on the page. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a pair of spectacles, a relatively new invention, and something many of his officers hadn't seen him wear before. He paused, looked out at his men, and uttered those immortal, heart-wrenching words. "Gentlemen, you will permit me to put on my spectacles, for I have grown not only gray, but almost blind in the service of my country." This wasn't a calculated, rhetorical trick. It was a deeply human moment, an unscripted display of vulnerability and humility from the legendary commander. The effect was immediate and profound. Many of the battle-hardened officers, who had faced cannon fire without flinching, were moved to tears. They saw not just their general, but an old soldier, tired and worn, who had sacrificed just as much, if not more, than they had. His words, delivered with such a raw emotion and personal sacrifice, cut through their anger and resentment. Washington continued his address, pleading with them not to tarnish their glorious achievements with an act of betrayal. He urged them to have faith in Congress, to maintain their honor, and to remember the higher ideals they had fought for. He painted a stark picture of the chaos and ruin that would ensue if the army turned on its own government. He appealed to their patriotism, their integrity, and their commitment to Republican ideals. He reminded them that they were the guardians of liberty, not its destroyers. His tearful speech, coupled with his genuine empathy and shared sacrifice, completely disarmed the burgeoning rebellion. The officers, swayed by his sincerity and reminded of their shared bonds and noble cause, passed resolutions reaffirming their loyalty to Congress and expressing their faith in Washington's leadership. The conspiracy, which had threatened to rip the nascent nation apart, dissolved then and there, not through force, but through the power of moral authority, empathy, and leadership. The Newburgh Conspiracy stands as a testament to the fragile nature of new governments and the critical importance of strong, principled leadership. Washington's actions that day solidified his reputation as a man of unparalleled integrity and selfless devotion to the Republic. He not only saved the United States from internal collapse, but also set a crucial precedent that the military would always remain subordinate to civilian authority, a cornerstone of American democracy. To this very day, this moment underscores that even in the face of immense injustice and hardship, there are paths that uphold principle and preserve unity. Washington's wisdom averted a catastrophe and ensured that the sacrifices of the Revolutionary War were not in vain. It's a powerful reminder that true leadership often comes not from wielding power, but from demonstrating humility, understanding, and an unwavering commitment to the greater good. What an incredible story, right? It really makes you appreciate the delicate balance of those early years and the extraordinary individuals who navigated them. If you found this dive into history as fascinating as I did, please hit that like button. Share this video with a fellow history enthusiast, and don't forget to subscribe for more deep dives into the stories that shaped our world. Your support helps us keep bringing these crucial narratives to life. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our journey through American history. Today, we're diving into a moment so pivotal, it quite literally shaped the destiny of an entire nation. We're in Chapter 6, the moment of decision. And believe me, you won't want to miss this. Picture this. The Revolutionary War is over. The dust has settled, the British are gone, and America, against all odds, has won its independence. Now, what happens next? This is where our hero, George Washington, steps onto a stage far grander than any battlefield. After years of leading the Continental Army, enduring unimaginable hardships, and ultimately securing freedom, Washington held immense power and prestige. The gratitude, the admiration, the sheer reverence people felt for him was boundless. He was the indispensable man, the father of this fledgling country. But with great power comes, well, many temptations. In the aftermath of war, a group of high-ranking officers, frustrated by the inefficiencies of Congress, and deeply loyal to Washington, approached him with a proposal that, had he accepted, would have rerouted the course of American history entirely. They offered him a crown. Yes, a crown. They suggested he'd become king, or at least establish some form of military dictatorship, believing it was the only way to bring stability and order to the chaotic new nation. They saw him as the perfect monarch, a benevolent ruler who could unite the states and ensure their future. Now, imagine that. The man who had fought for liberty, now being offered the very symbol of the tyranny they had just overthrown. This wasn't a fringe idea. It was a serious proposition from influential figures. It was a golden ticket to absolute power, a chance to solidify his legacy in a way no one else in American history ever had. Many would have seized it without a second thought. Empires had been built on far less. But Washington was different. He understood the profound implications of such an act. He knew that if he accepted, he would betray everything they had fought for. He would extinguish the very flame of freedom he had helped ignite. His response was immediate, resolute, and utterly breathtaking. He firmly rejected the offer, not just politely, but with conviction that echoed through the ages. Obak, scolding the officer who presented the idea, General Louis Nicola, saying, "Be assured, sir, no occurrence in my life has affected me more sensibly than your late communication. ... I am much at a loss to conceive what part of my conduct could have given encouragement to an address which, to me, seems big. With the greatest mischiefs that can befall my country." He went on to famously declare that he had no wish to seek for personal power. Let that sink in. No wish to seek for personal power. In a world dominated by monarchs and emperors, where leaders clung to power with iron fists, Washington willingly and emphatically walked away from it. This wasn't just a refusal, it was a profound philosophical statement, a living testament to the principles of a republic. He wasn't interested in being a king. He was committed to being a citizen, albeit an extraordinary one, serving a nation founded on the consent of the governed, not the divine right of kings. This moment, this single decision, set a precedent that was unprecedented in human history. It established civilian control over the military, a cornerstone of American democracy. It demonstrated that leadership in a republic meant service, not domination. It showed the world that a leader could achieve greatness, not by grasping power, but by relinquishing it for the greater good of the people. It solidified the American experiment, proving that a government of the people, by people, for the people, was not just an ideal, but a viable reality. Think about the ripple effect of this choice. Every American president who followed has, in some way, stood on the shoulders of this decision. The peaceful transfer of power, the commitment to democratic institutions. These are direct descendants of Washington's unwavering integrity at this critical juncture. He literally defined what it meant to be a leader in a free republic, setting a moral compass for generations to come. So, the next time you think about leadership, remember George Washington's moment of decision. It wasn't about winning battles. It was about winning the war for liberty and self-governance, not just with swords, but with an unshakable commitment to principle. It was a defining moment for him. Yes, but more importantly, it was the defining moment for the very soul of the United States. What do you think about Washington's refusal? Has any other leader in history shown such restraint? Let us know in the comments below. If you enjoy this dive into history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more incredible stories, and share this video with anyone who loves learning about the pivotal moments that shaped our world. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into one of the most pivotal and perhaps least understood moments in American history. A decision that truly defined the character of its first leader and set an extraordinary precedent for democracies worldwide. We're talking about Chapter 7. George Washington returning home to Mount Vernon. Now, imagine this. You've just led a ragtag army against the most powerful empire on earth, and won. You're the hero, the commander-in-chief, the man who secured your nation's freedom. The people adore you. The army's loyal, and you hold virtually unlimited power. What do most leaders throughout history, faced with such an opportunity, would consolidate that power, perhaps crown themselves king or rule for life. But George Washington, he did the unthinkable. He walked Hawaii. After 8 long years of grueling war, after leading the Continental Army through unimaginable hardships and ultimately to victory, Washington didn't march on Philadelphia to seize control. He didn't declare himself emperor. Instead, on December 23, 1783, he journeyed to Annapolis, Maryland, where Congress was then convened. In a room filled with awestruck delegates, he formally resigned his commission as commander-in-chief of the army. He simply returned his sword, thanked the country for its trust, and declared his intention to retire to his beloved Mount Vernon. This wasn't just a political move. It was a profound statement. It was Washington saying, "I fought for liberty, not for personal glory or power." And the world was absolutely stunned. Picture the monarchs of Europe, sitting on their gilded thrones, hearing this news. Kings and emperors who had inherited their power, or seized it through force, simply couldn't fathom it. To them, power was to be held onto at all costs. To voluntarily relinquish absolute authority, to step down from the pinnacle of command and become a private citizen again, it was unheard of. It was revolutionary, not just for America, but for the very concept of leadership. This act, known as Washington's farewell to the army and his subsequent resignation, sent shockwaves across the globe. King George III himself, Washington's former adversary, reportedly said that if Washington indeed retired, he would be the greatest man in the world. And he was right. This single act demonstrated an unparalleled commitment to Republican ideals, that power ultimately rests with the people, not with any single individual, and that leaders are servants of the public, not their masters. So, Washington bid farewell to his officers, many of whom wept openly, and then made the relatively short journey back to his estate in Virginia. He wasn't going back to a life of ease, though Mount Vernon, his home and plantation, had suffered during the war, and he had a tremendous amount of work ahead of him to restore it. But this was exactly what he wanted. He wanted to be a farmer, a husband, a private citizen. He truly yearned for the quiet domesticity he had sacrificed for so long. Imagine the peace he must have felt, riding up that long driveway, seeing his home after so many years of war and uncertainty. The burdens of a nascent nation momentarily lifted from his shoulders. He was finally free from the immense pressure of leading a revolution, free from the constant threat of capture or defeat. He was home. But his retirement wasn't just about personal peace. It was a powerful message to a nascent republic. It underscored the civilian control of the military, a fundamental principle of American democracy. It showed that military leaders serve the state, not rule it. This precedent was incredibly important, ensuring that the young United States would not fall into the trap of military dictatorships that plagued many nations throughout history. He spent the next few years immersed in agricultural pursuits, improving his estate and managing his affairs. He corresponded with friends, entertained visitors, and enjoyed the simple pleasures of rural life. He thought his public service was truly over. Yet, as we know, destiny had other plans for him. The young nation, struggling under the Articles of Confederation, would soon call upon him again, this time to preside over the Constitutional Convention and eventually become its first president. But that's a story for another time. For now, let's reflect on this incredible moment. A man who could have been king chose to be a citizen. It's a testament to his character, his unwavering commitment to the principles of liberty and self-governance, and it remains a shining example for leaders everywhere. It's why Washington is often referred to as the City of the West, comparing him to the Roman general who famously left his plow to save Rome and then returned to his farm once the crisis was over. This act of relinquishing power established a moral authority that few leaders in history have ever achieved. It solidified the idea that, in America, no one is above the law, and no one is indispensable. Leaders serve at the will of the people and must be willing to step aside. It was, quite simply, the greatest lesson in humility and democratic leadership the world had ever seen. So, what do you think about Washington's decision to return to Mount Vernon? What does it say about his character and the values he held? Let us know in the comments below. If you found this historical deep dive interesting, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a moment in history where the stakes were impossibly high, and one man's audacity reshaped the world. We're in Chapter 8 of our journey, a chapter aptly titled, "The World Watches in Awe." Imagine, if you will, the opulent courts of Europe. Picture the monarchs, draped in their silks and jewels, their power seemingly unshakable. These weren't just kings and queens, they were the absolute rulers of vast empires, accustomed to having the world bend to their will. So, when news started trickling across the Atlantic, news of a young nation daring to defy the mightiest empire on earth, their initial reaction wasn't awe, but outright disbelief. They sat on their thrones, sometimes literally miles away, receiving dispatches that painted a picture so improbable, so audacious, that many simply scoffed. A ragtag group of rebels, they might have muttered, challenging the British Empire. It's absurd. They'll be crushed in weeks, months. At most they saw their own rigid hierarchies, their established power structures, and couldn't fathom a successful rebellion led by what they perceived as upstarts. This wasn't just skepticism. It was a deeply ingrained worldview that rejected the very possibility of such an outcome. Their disbelief wasn't just about the military might involved, though that was a huge part of it. It was about the challenge to the very concept of monarchy, of divinely appointed rule. If these American revolutionaries succeeded, what precedent would that set? What ideas might that spark in the hearts of their *O and * subjects? The thought was unsettling, even dangerous, to their way of life. They dismissed it as a fleeting uprising, a minor inconvenience that would soon be quelled. But as the days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, something remarkable started to happen. The news didn't stop. In fact, it grew more insistent, more incredible. The ragtag rebels weren't just fighting. They were holding their own. They were winning battles, displaying a resilience and determination that baffled the seasoned military minds of Europe. The monarchs, initially so dismissive, found themselves having to confront an increasingly uncomfortable reality. And then there's King George III himself, the very monarch against whom this monumental struggle was being waged. He was the epitome of the established order, the embodiment of the power these revolutionaries sought to break free from. He had every reason to be the most stubborn, the most unyielding in his disbelief. Yet, even he, in a moment of astonishing candor, uttered words that would echo through history. Words that perfectly encapsulate the dawning realization of just how significant these events were. King George III, upon hearing of the persistent defiance and the growing success of the American forces, is famously quoted as saying, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." He wasn't speaking about some abstract military victory or a fleeting political maneuver. He was acknowledging the sheer, almost mythical, challenge that was being met, and the profound historical impact it would have. Who was he referring to? Of course, he was speaking of George Washington, the leader who, against all odds, was guiding this nascent nation toward independence. Think about the weight of that statement coming from the very man who stood to lose the most. It wasn't a compliment, not in the traditional sense, but an involuntary acknowledgement of immense respect for the scale of the undertaking. It was a realization that if this impossible feat were accomplished, it would transcend mere military victory and enter the realm of legendary achievement. It spoke volumes about the AOG. However grudging, that was beginning to permeate even the most hardened hearts in Europe. This wasn't just about military might. It was about the power of an idea. The idea of self-determination, of liberty, of a government of the people, by the people. These concepts, considered radical and dangerous by the old world, were taking root and flourishing across an ocean. The world, whether they liked it or not, was indeed watching, and slowly, grudgingly, all began to replace disbelief. The implications of such a success were staggering. It meant that the old order wasn't as invincible as it seemed. It meant that a new path was being forged, a different way for nations to be born and governed. And that, my friends, is why this chapter is so crucial. It sets the stage for a dramatic shift in global perspectives, demonstrating how courage and conviction can challenge even the most entrenched powers. So, what do you think about King George III's reluctant admiration? Can you imagine the pressure on Washington, knowing even his adversaries saw the monumental nature of his task? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please give this video a thumbs up, subscribe to the channel, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you're new here, hit that subscribe button and join our history-loving community. Today, we're diving into a crucial, often overlooked period in American history, Chapter 9, the weak Confederation. You might think winning independence was the hardest part, right? Well, buckle up, because what came next was a whole different kind of struggle. A fight to simply stay united. Imagine you've just won the biggest, most important team game of your life. Everyone's cheering. But then, instead of celebrating together, the players start arguing about who gets to keep the ball, who pays for the victory party, and who even cleans up the field. That's pretty much what happened to the United States right after the Revolutionary War. We had defeated the mighty British Empire, but now, the young nation faced an internal challenge that nearly tore it apart. The document meant to govern this new country was called the Articles of Confederation. And let me tell you, it was a work in progress. Let's just say that. The Articles were designed to create a very loose alliance of states, not a strong central government. Why? Because after fighting a war against a powerful king and parliament, the last thing Americans wanted was another strong, potentially tyrannical, central authority. They were paranoid about replicating the very oppression they'd just escaped. So, they intentionally made the federal government weak, almost toothless. Under the Articles, the central government consisted mainly of a Congress. But this Congress had very little power. It couldn't directly tax the states or the people. Instead, it had to request money from the states. And guess what? States often said, "Nah, we're good," or simply didn't pay up their full share. Imagine trying to run a country, pay off war debts, and maintain an army without a reliable income. It was like trying to bake a cake without being able to buy ingredients, a recipe for disaster. This financial weakness led to some serious headaches. The Continental Congress, which had borrowed heavily to fund the war, found itself unable to pay its soldiers, its suppliers, or even the interest on its foreign loans. Soldiers, many of whom had risked their lives for independence, were often paid in worthless paper money or not at all. This led to deep resentment and even small rebellions, like Shays' Rebellion, which we'll talk about later. Beyond finances, there was no strong executive branch to enforce laws, and no national court system to resolve disputes between states. So, when states started quarreling, and oh, did they quarrel, there was no effective referee. For example, states like New York and Virginia, with their larger populations and thriving ports, began imposing taxes on goods from other states. It was like each state was its own mini-country, setting up its own trade barriers, currency, and even foreign policies. This made interstate commerce incredibly difficult and discouraged economic growth for everyone. Think about it. If you were a farmer in Connecticut trying to sell your produce in New York, you might face tariffs that make your goods more expensive and less competitive. This wasn't fostering unity. It was fostering division and economic chaos. The vision of a united America was quickly fading into a collection of squabbling, self-interested sovereign entities. Another huge problem was foreign relations. Without a strong central government, the United States looked incredibly weak on the international stage. European powers, who had initially been impressed by America's victory, now saw a disunited, financially unstable collection of states. Britain, for instance, refused to evacuate forts in the Northwest Territory, claiming the U.S. hadn't repaid pre-war debts to British merchants. Spain, meanwhile, closed the port of New Orleans to American trade, crippling farmers in the Western Territories who relied on the Mississippi River to transport their goods. The American government was powerless to effectively negotiate or enforce treaties. It was a period of profound uncertainty and anxiety. Many prominent leaders, including George Washington, James Madison and Alexander Hamilton became increasingly alarmed. They saw the young republic teetering on the brink of collapse, threatened by internal strife and external disrespect. Washington himself referred to the Confederation as a rope of sand, strong enough to bind nothing. The grand experiment in self-governance, which had started with such revolutionary promise, was in serious danger of failing. This dire situation, however, served as a crucial catalyst. It forced these visionary leaders to recognize that a fundamental change was needed. The Articles of Confederation, while a noble first attempt, were simply not robust enough to manage a growing, diverse nation. The very struggles and failures of this period highlighted the critical need for a stronger, more effective central government, one that could truly unite the states, manage finances, enforce laws, and command respect on the world stage. And that, my friends, sets the stage for our next big chapter. The Constitutional Convention. The challenges of the weak Confederation were not just a series of problems. They were the hard-earned lessons that paved the way for the creation of one of the most enduring political documents in history. So, what do you think? Was the Articles of Confederation doomed from the start, or was it a necessary step in America's journey to define itself? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this deep dive, please give this video a thumbs up, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe for more historical insights. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a pivotal moment in American history, a moment that saw a reluctant hero called back to the stage of destiny. We're talking about Chapter 10, A Call to Duty once more, and it centers on none other than George Washington. Imagine this. It's 1787. The Revolutionary War is over. The ink on the Treaty of Paris has long dried, and Washington, the victorious commander-in-chief, has done what few powerful men ever do. He's gone home. He's back at Mount Vernon, overseeing his sprawling estate, enjoying the quiet life of a farmer, a private citizen. He's relishing this peace, this well-deserved respite after years of grueling conflict and immense responsibility. He truly believed his public service was concluded. He had famously resigned his commission, setting a powerful precedent for civilian control of the military. A hallmark of American democracy. He laid down his sword, not to seize power, but to return to his plow. But the young United States was in trouble. Big trouble. The Articles of Confederation, the nation's first attempt at a governing document, were proving woefully inadequate. The central government was weak, almost powerless. States were squabbling, economies were struggling, and the dream of a united nation, so hard-won, seemed to be unraveling. There was no common currency. States taxed each other's goods, and insurrections, like Shays' Rebellion in Massachusetts, highlighted the fragility of the entire experiment. The very idea of America as a stable, unified republic was at risk. Recognizing this looming crisis, a chorus of influential leaders began to emerge, all sharing a single, urgent thought. America needed George Washington. They knew that without his immense prestige, his unwavering integrity, and his unique ability to command respect from all factions, any attempt to fix the government would likely fail. People trusted Washington like no other. His presence alone could lend legitimacy and authority to any gathering, any proposal. So, the pleas began. Letters started arriving at Mount Vernon, one after another, from luminaries like James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, and even his old friend, General Henry Knox. They weren't just asking for his opinion. They were begging him to attend a convention scheduled for Philadelphia in May of 1787, a convention aimed at revising the Articles of Confederation. Madison, in particular, stressed the absolute necessity of Washington's attendance, writing, "A sanction from your name is indispensable." They understood that he was the glue that could hold the fragile Union together. But Washington hesitated, and honestly, who could blame him? He was tired. He was older now, feeling the effects of years in the saddle and the stresses of command. He cherished his retirement, the domestic tranquility of Mount Vernon. He also worried about his reputation. What if this convention failed? What if his presence associated him with a doomed effort? He had risked everything for the cause of liberty, and he didn't want to jeopardize the legacy he had so carefully built by wading back into what seemed like an almost impossible political quagmire. He had promised the nation and himself that his days of public service were over. To return would be to break that promise, or at least to seem to. He had already given so much, endured so much. The idea of re-entering the tumultuous political arena, especially for something as uncertain as remaking the very structure of the government, was daunting. He weighed these concerns heavily. He corresponded with his friends, expressing his doubts, his health concerns, his desire for privacy. Yet, despite his reluctance, a deeper sense of conviction began to stir within him. It was that familiar, unwavering force that had guided him through the darkest days of the war. Duty. He saw the reports from various states, read the desperate pleas from his former comrades and trusted colleagues. He understood the gravity of the situation. The American experiment, the very ideal of self-governance, was teetering on the brink. How could he stand by and watch it collapse? Okolde, who had led the fight for independence, refused to lend his aid when that independence was threatened, not by foreign enemies, but by internal strife and a flawed system. He felt the weight of his conscience, the responsibility that came with being America's most revered citizen. His sense of duty wasn't about personal ambition or glory. It was about the survival of the nation he had helped create. It was about securing the blessings of liberty for future generations. Finally, after much deliberation and internal struggle, Washington made his decision. He would go to Philadelphia. He packed his bags, said farewell to his beloved Mount Vernon, and set off on the journey. His presence at the Constitutional Convention was a powerful symbol even before the first gavel fell. It signaled to the nation and to the world that this was a serious undertaking, a last-ditch effort to salvage the American dream. His arrival in Philadelphia was met with immense anticipation. Everyone knew that if George Washington was involved, there was hope. He was unanimously elected president of the convention, a role that, while largely ceremonial, was crucial. His quiet leadership, his ability to mediate disputes, and his sheer moral authority were instrumental in holding the diverse and often contentious delegates together. He didn't dominate the debates, but his watchful eye and unwavering commitment to a stronger union influenced every session. This moment, Washington's reluctant but resolute return, wasn't just about one man. It was about the power of leadership, the call of duty over personal desire, and the realization that sometimes the greatest sacrifices are made not on the battlefield but in the quiet chambers where the future of a nation is forged. It set the stage for one of the most remarkable acts of political innovation in history, of the United States Constitution. It's a powerful reminder that even our greatest heroes face moments of doubt and hesitation, but true leadership emerges when duty calls, and they answer. What do you think about Washington's decision? Would you have done the same? Let me know in the comments below. Don't forget to like this video, share it with your friends, and subscribe for more deep dives into history. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a pivotal moment in American history. Chapter 11, The Birth of a Constitution. This isn't just a dry historical account. It's the thrilling story of how a nation, born from revolution, painstakingly crafted its own foundational blueprint. And at the heart of this crucial period, standing as a silent, powerful anchor, was none other than George Washington. Imagine the scene. It's May 1787, in Philadelphia. The air is thick with tension and anticipation. The young United States, having just won its independence, is realizing that the Articles of Confederation, its first attempt at a national government, is simply anti-working. The country is fragmented, economically unstable, and on the brink of collapse. Something had to be done, and fast. So, delegates from 12 of the 13 states, Rhode Island notably absent, gathered. This wasn't a casual meeting. This was a high-stakes endeavor, tasked with nothing less than redefining the very fabric of American governance. And who did they choose to preside over this intensely delicate and often contentious process? George Washington, His presence alone was monumental. Washington didn't enter the Constitutional Convention as a fiery debater or a primary author of specific clauses. Instead, his role was far more profound and, arguably, more critical. He was the convention's president, and his leadership style was exactly what the moment demanded. He presided with an almost stoic dignity, a quiet authority that commanded respect and maintained order in a room filled with brilliant, passionate, and often clashing personalities. Think about it. Here were some of the brightest minds of the era: James Madison, Alexander Hamilton, Benjamin Franklin, Gouverneur Morris, and many more, each with strong convictions about the best path forward for the new republic. Debates were fierce, disagreements were frequent, and the risk of the whole enterprise falling apart was very real. Washington's integrity, his unwavering reputation for honesty and selflessness, was the glue that held it all together. His very presence lent immense credibility to the proceedings. If George Washington, the hero of the Revolution, believed in this convention and its mission, then surely it was a noble and necessary undertaking. His tacit approval, his quiet attentiveness, and his rare, yet impactful, interventions helped steer the delegates through turbulent waters. He didn't dictate, but he facilitated, ensuring that every voice was heard and that the discussions remained focused on the common good, despite significant differences. One key aspect of his presidency was his commitment to secrecy. He understood that the delicate nature of the debates required a private setting, free from public pressure and premature judgment. The windows were shut, the doors were guarded, and a vow of silence was taken by all delegates. This allowed for frank and open discussion, enabling delegates to change their minds without public embarrassment, a crucial element for compromise. Washington enforced this rule strictly, even famously rebuking a delegate for accidentally dropping a copy of meeting notes. This focus on privacy underscores the immense trust placed in Washington. His reputation for personal honor was so strong that his presence alone deterred any attempts at undue influence or corruption. He was, in many ways, the moral compass of the convention. His leadership wasn't about power plays. It was about steady, principled guidance. The creation of the Constitution was a monumental task. It involved grappling with fundamental questions: how to balance state and federal power, how to represent both large and small states, how to elect a president, and the complex, painful issue of slavery. Each decision was fraught with potential pitfalls that could have unraveled the entire effort. Through it all, Washington remained the steady hand at the tiller. His silence often spoke volumes. When he did speak, it was usually to urge compromise, to remind delegates of the greater purpose, or to underscore the need for a strong, unified government. His calm demeanor helped to de-escalate tensions and foster a spirit of collaboration, even when disagreements were profound. Ultimately, the Constitution that emerged from Philadelphia in September 1787 was a testament not only to the brilliance of its framers, but also to the exceptional leadership of George Washington. His integrity, his gravitas, and his unwavering commitment to the nascent nation provided the essential credibility and stability needed to transform a collection of contentious ideas into a durable framework for government. Without his steady hand, it's hard to imagine how the convention could have succeeded. He didn't write many of its words, but he ensured the environment where those words could be written and agreed upon. And that, my friends, is the incredible story of how Washington's quiet strength helped birth one of the most enduring political documents in human history. It's a powerful reminder that leadership isn't always about being the loudest voice in the room. Sometimes, it's about being the most principled and trustworthy. What do you think about Washington's role in the Constitutional Convention? Let me know in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into history, please hit that like button, subscribe for more content, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a moment that truly shaped the United States as we know it. A chapter we're calling Elected by the People. We're heading back to 1789, a time of immense hope and uncertainty, right after the ink had barely dried on our brand new Constitution. Imagine, if you will, a young nation just finding its footing, looking for a leader to guide it. And that, my friends, is where our story begins. Now, when we think of presidential elections today, We picture huge campaigns, debates, rallies, and maybe even a little bit of drama, right? But what happened in 1789 was unlike anything we'd ever see again. The people of this nascent United States, after a hard-fought revolution and years of figuring out how to govern themselves, faced a monumental task, choosing their very first president. And the choice, in their hearts and minds, was crystal clear. The individual they had in mind was someone who had already proven his leadership, his integrity, and his unwavering commitment to the cause of liberty. He was a figure who had famously and remarkably surrendered his military command after securing victory, rather than seizing power. This act alone spoke volumes about his character. He was, of course, George Washington. What is truly astonishing about Washington's election in 1789 is the absolute lack of what we consider a modern campaign. There were no campaign speeches, no political advertisements, In fact, Washington himself didn't even actively seek the office. Can you imagine that today? A potential president not campaigning? It's almost unthinkable. Washington was at his beloved Mount Vernon, hoping for a quiet retirement after a lifetime of service. But the call of duty and the overwhelming will of the people was too strong to ignore. The Electoral College, a system established by the Constitution, was in its very first test run, and the results? Unanimous. Every single elector cast their vote for George Washington. That's right, 100% of the electoral votes. It's a feat that has never been replicated in American history. This wasn't just a simple election, it was a profound statement. It demonstrated a collective trust and faith in one man's ability to lead this grand experiment called the United States of America. The people didn't just elect a president, they chose a symbol of unity, stability, and Republican virtue. They chose someone who they believed would put the nation's interests above his own. This unique moment in history highlights a powerful principle: the idea of service over ambition. Washington wasn't driven by a desire for personal power or fame. His motivation stemmed from a deep sense of responsibility to the nation he had helped create. He understood the immense weight of the presidency and the precedents he would set for generations to come. Every action he took, every decision he made, would be scrutinized, copied, and remembered. Think about the pressure on his shoulders. He was stepping into uncharted territory, creating the very foundations of the executive branch. There was no playbook, no established traditions for how a president should behave, how the government should function under this new constitution. He had to invent it all, from the way he addressed Congress to how he handled foreign policy, and he did so with remarkable grace, dignity, and prudence. His journey from Mount Vernon to New York City, then the capital, was like a triumphal procession. People lined the streets, cheering, celebrating, and perhaps a little anxious about the future. His inauguration on the balcony of Federal Hall was a solemn and moving occasion, a moment pregnant with historical significance. He took the oath, placing his hand on a Bible, and uttered words that still resonate today. So, what can we learn from this extraordinary moment in history? It reminds us that leadership isn't always about the loudest voice or the most aggressive campaign. Sometimes, true leadership emerges from a place of quiet integrity, selfless dedication, and a genuine desire to serve. It underscores the power of a united populace choosing a leader not out of political maneuvering, but out of profound respect and trust. Washington's unanimous election set a powerful precedent for the American presidency. It established an ideal, a benchmark for what it means to lead a free people. While the nature of elections has certainly evolved over time, this foundational moment continues to inspire us to seek leaders who embody integrity, who prioritize the common good, and who are truly committed to the service of their nation. It is a beautiful reminder of what is possible when a people unite behind a common vision and a trusted leader. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey back to 1789. If you enjoyed learning about this incredible piece of American history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more insights, and let me know in the comments below what you found most surprising about Washington's election. Your support helps us keep these stories alive. See you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a truly pivotal moment in history, a story that shaped not just a nation, but the very idea of leadership itself. We're opening up chapter 13, Leading Without a Crown, and trust me, it is a masterclass in how to build a legacy that lasts far beyond any single term in office. When we talk about foundational figures, George Washington often comes up as the father of his country, right? But it's not just about winning the Revolutionary War. It's about what he did after the war, especially during his presidency, that truly cemented his place in history and set an unbreakable standard for democratic leadership. Think about it. This was a time when kings ruled, when power was inherited, and when the idea of a leader voluntarily stepping away from ultimate authority was almost unthinkable. Yet, Washington did just that, and in doing so, he set every precedent for how a new republic should act, how its leaders should lead, and critically, how they should eventually step back. So, let's explore this idea of leading without a crown. What exactly does that mean? It means leading not through divine right or inherited power, but through service, principle, and a deep understanding of the people you represent. It's about being the first, but also understanding that you won't be the last, and that the institution you're building is far more important than any individual. Washington's presidency, from 1789 to 1797, wasn't just a period of governance. It was an active demonstration of what democratic leadership could and should look like. He understood, perhaps better than anyone, that every decision he made, every action he took, would be scrutinized and would serve as a template for future leaders. He was literally writing the playbook for a president. There was no manual, no prior American president to look to. He was ed asterisk. One of the first challenges Washington faced was simply defining the office of the president. Should he act like a king? Should he embrace pomp and circumstance? The temptation must have been immense. He was a war hero, revered by the people. He could have easily consolidated power, but he consciously chose a different path. He established the tradition of calling the president Mr. President, a simple title that conveyed respect but also equality, intentionally avoiding any regal overtones. He chose a relatively modest residence, even though grander options were available. These weren't trivial decisions. They were deliberate acts to underscore that this new leader was a public servant, not a sovereign. He also had to navigate the treacherous waters of forming a new government. The Constitution was a fresh document, full of brilliant ideas, but lacking practical implementation. Washington had to fill the critical positions in his cabinet, and he did so by bringing together brilliant but often clashing minds like Alexander Hamilton and Thomas Jefferson. Imagine trying to get those two in the same room, let alone on the same team. But Washington understood the value of diverse perspectives, even when they led to heated debates. He saw himself as the unifying force, the steady hand guiding these brilliant individuals toward the common good. He didn't demand total subservience. He fostered rigorous debate, knowing that the best policies would emerge from challenging discussions. His leadership style was characterized by a meticulous attention to detail, a profound sense of duty, and an unwavering commitment to Republican ideals. He traveled the country, connecting with citizens, listening to their concerns, and showing them that their government was present and accountable. This wasn't just a PR tour. It was about building trust in a nascent political system. He knew that the legitimacy of the new government depended on the people feeling connected to it, seeing it as asterisk. Their asterisk, government. Perhaps one of the most defining aspects of his leading without a crown approach was his handling of domestic crises. Take the Whiskey Rebellion, for example. Farmers in western Pennsylvania rebelled against a federal tax on whiskey, feeling it was unfair. This was a direct challenge to the authority of the new federal government. Washington could have hesitated, worried about alienating citizens. Instead, he led federal troops himself, demonstrating that the new government had the power and the will to enforce its laws and maintain order. But even in this display of strength, there was a democratic principle at play. The rule of law must be upheld, and disputes should be resolved through the legislative process, not through armed resistance. He pardoned many of the rebels afterward, showing a balance of justice and mercy, further solidifying the government's legitimacy. On the international front, Washington navigated a complex world with a fledgling nation. He issued the Proclamation of Neutrality in 1793, keeping the young United States out of the escalating conflict between Great Britain and revolutionary France. This was a hugely controversial decision at the time, with many supporting one side or the other. But Washington understood that the new nation needed time to grow and solidify before it could engage in foreign entanglements. He prioritized national interest and stability over ideological allegiances, laying the groundwork for a foreign policy that would serve the country for generations. Now, let us talk about the absolute pinnacle of leading without a crown: Washington's decision to step down after 2 terms. In 1796, as his second term was coming to an end, there was immense pressure for him to run for a third. He was beloved, respected, and seen by many as indispensable. No one had ever voluntarily relinquished such power before in a modern republic. He could have easily served for life, and many expected him to. But Washington profoundly understood the danger of a perpetual leader. He believed that the strength of the republic depended not on one individual, but on the institutions themselves and the peaceful transfer of power. His farewell address is a testament to this philosophy. In it, he warned against the dangers of political factions, excessive foreign entanglements, and accumulating national debt. But most importantly, he delivered a powerful message about the cyclical nature of democratic leadership. He was making a profound statement that no one person is above the law, no one person is essential to the survival of the republic, and that the office is greater than the man. By stepping aside, he created the critical precedent of a limited presidency, ensuring that America would never have a king. This act, more than any other, defined the character of the American presidency and the very essence of leading without a crown. It's an act of selflessness and foresight that continues to inspire. His presidency wasn't just about governing, it was about modeling. He modeled civility, integrity, and a deep respect for the nascent democratic process. He understood that the early days of the republic were fragile and that every choice he made would contribute to its eventual strength or weakness. He didn't always get it perfectly right. No líder do es. But his guiding star was always the long-term health and stability of the American experiment. So, when we look back at Washington's time in office, we see more than just a list of policies or events. We see a deliberate and courageous effort to establish a new form of leadership, one where power is derived from the people, exercised responsibly, and voluntarily relinquished for the greater good. He truly led without a crown, not just by declining one, but by embodying the principles of humility, service, and institutional strength that are the bedrock of any successful democracy. It's a powerful lesson for today, isn't it? That true leadership isn't about holding on to power, but about empowering others, building strong institutions, and knowing when it's time to pass the torch. Washington's model of democratic leadership continues to be a guiding light, reminding us that the greatest legacy isn't built on personal glory, but on service and the strengthening of the very foundations of freedom. What do y'all think? How does Washington's presidency inspire you? Let me know in the comments below. And if you found this deep dive into leading without a crown insightful, please hit that like button, subscribe for more historical journeys, and share this video with anyone who appreciates the incredible story of our past. Your support truly helps this channel grow. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next chapter. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a fascinating thought experiment, a pivotal moment in American history that could have entirely reshaped the nation we know. We're talking about the King Who Never Was, Chapter 14 in our ongoing series. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, because this one's a real mind-bender. Imagine this. It's the late 1700s. The American Revolution is won, the dust is settling, and the new nation is struggling to find its footing. There's a widespread feeling that a strong, central leader is desperately needed to unite these fledgling states. And who better than the legendary George Washington, the general who led them to victory against the mighty British Empire? He was universally revered, a true national hero. Now, here's where a story takes a dramatic turn. In 1782, as the war was winding down, a group of disaffected Continental Army officers, frustrated with Congress's inability to pay them and secure their future, approached Washington with a truly astonishing proposal. They suggested that he assume royal power, that he become the King of America. Yes, you heard that right. King George, the first of the United States. They believed only a monarchy, with Washington at its head, could bring stability and order to the chaotic post-war landscape. This wasn't just a whisper in the shadows. It was a serious offer presented by Colonel Louis Nicola, on behalf of these officers. Can you even begin to picture it? A crown atop Washington's head, a scepter in his hand, a royal court in Philadelphia or New York. The very idea sends shivers down your spine, doesn't it? It goes against everything we understand about the American experiment. But Washington, ever the statesman and a man of impeccable character, did something extraordinary. He didn't waver. He didn't entertain the thought for a moment. He firmly, unequivocally, rejected the offer. He expressed his abhorrence at the suggestion, calling it painful and a dangerous precedent. He reminded them that such an action would be subversive of the principles of the revolution and could bring the greatest mischiefs upon the country. His response was a powerful testament to his commitment to Republican ideals and his profound understanding of the values they had fought for. Think about the sheer weight of that decision. Here was a man who could have seized ultimate power, been hailed as a monarch, and potentially secured his legacy in a way few others ever could. Yet, he chose a different path, a path of service to a greater ideal, a government of the people. Beat the people for the people. His refusal was a defining moment, solidifying his place not just as a military leader, but as the indispensable architect of American democracy. But let's play the what-if game for a moment. What if he had accepted? What if America had become a monarchy, a kingdom ruled by George I? The implications are truly staggering. First and foremost, democracy as we know it would likely never have taken root. The very foundation of the nation, built on principles of self-governance and individual liberty, would have crumbled before it was even fully laid. Imagine the historical trajectory. Would there have been a Bill of Rights? Perhaps a diluted version, granted by royal decree, but certainly not the inalienable rights we cherish today. The idea of checks and balances, of a legislative body with real power, would have been severely curtailed, if not entirely absent. The king's word would have been law, and dissent would have been treason. The path to a constitutional republic, painstakingly forged through debates, compromises, and the vision of countless framers, would have been abandoned. Instead of a series of peaceful transitions of power, we might have seen dynastic struggles, succession crisis, and the kind of internal conflicts that plagued European monarchies for centuries. The very concept of we the people would have been replaced by we the subjects. Furthermore, how would this have impacted the world? America, as a beacon of liberty and a model for democratic aspirations around the globe, would have been extinguished before it truly shone. The American Revolution's message, that people could govern themselves, that they didn't need kings, would have been undermined by its very own leader. The ripple effect across Europe and other emerging nations would have been profoundly different, perhaps delaying the spread of democratic ideals by decades, if not centuries. The states themselves, already diverse and often at odds, might have struggled to stay united under a monarch. Would they have embraced a king from Virginia? Or would regional identities have led to further fragmentation? Perhaps even separate kingdoms or independent states? The vision of a unified nation, a United States, might have remained an elusive dream. Washington's rejection of kingship wasn't just a personal choice. It was a profound act of nation-building. It sent an undeniable message, both domestically and internationally. America would be different. It would be a republic, a place where power resided with the people, not with the sovereign. It set a precedent for civilian control over the military, for limited government, and for the peaceful transfer of power. His humility and unwavering commitment to the ideals of the revolution enshrined the principle that no individual, however revered, was above the law or the will of the people. This moment underscores the fragility of new political systems and the incredible importance of individual leadership in times of crisis. Washington had the opportunity to become a king, to emulate the very rulers they had just overthrown. But he chose instead to become something far more enduring and revolutionary. The first president of a republic. A citizen leader who understood that true power came from consent of the governed, not divine right. His decision didn't just prevent America from becoming a monarchy. It actively shaped the kind of democracy it would become. It was a statement of principles, a declaration that the American experiment was about something fundamentally new and different. It laid the groundwork for a nation where every citizen, not just a king, holds a piece of the sovereignty. So, The next time you reflect on American history, take a moment to truly appreciate the king who never was. Washington's steadfast refusal of ultimate power was not just a historical footnote. It was a cornerstone of American democracy, a moment that ensured the survival of the republic. It's a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest leaders are not those who seek to accumulate power, but those who understand when to relinquish it for the greater good. What do you all think? How different would America be today if Washington had accepted the crown? Share your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoyed this dive into alternative history, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more thought-provoking content, and ring that notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter. Thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a pivotal moment in history, a chapter filled with immense challenges, yet ultimately a testament to unwavering leadership. Get ready for Chapter 15. Trials of a New Republic. Imagine this. A newly formed nation, fresh from a hard-won struggle for independence, now staring down a mountain of problems. The ink on its founding documents is barely dry, and already it's facing tests that could tear it apart. This is the world our president stepped into, a world where the very idea of a republic was a fragile experiment. First up, the shadow of rebellion. Not just whispers of discontent, but outright defiance against the young government. People were tired, some felt unheard, and pockets of armed resistance began to emerge. This wasn't some distant enemy. This was conflict from within, a direct challenge to the authority the nation had just fought so hard to establish. How do you respond to your own citizens rising up? Do you meet force with brute force? Do you betray the principles of liberty you just enshrined? Our president faced this agonizing choice, and he knew, with every fiber of his being, that the future of the republic depended on a steady hand, not a heavy one. He understood that responding with excessive power would only breed more resentment and could shatter the fragile unity of the nation. It was a delicate dance between maintaining order and respecting the very freedoms that rebellion sought to challenge. Then came the specter of debt. The war for independence had been costly, leaving the fledgling nation with a staggering financial burden. Imagine trying to build a country when you're already deep in the red, with creditors knocking on the door and no clear path to solvency. This wasn't just an economic problem. It was a crisis of trust. Could this new government manage its finances? Could it honor its commitments? If it failed, the global community would see it as a failed experiment, and its own people would lose faith. The solutions were not easy, requiring difficult compromises and innovative thinking. It meant navigating conflicting interests within the new government itself, with different factions holding starkly different views on economic policy. But the president understood that a stable economy was the bedrock of a stable nation, and he was determined to lay that foundation, even if it meant making unpopular decisions. And finally, the most insidious challenge of all: division. The nation, though united in its fight for freedom, was far from uniform in its vision for the future. Deep ideological rifts emerged, separating people into passionate, often opposing, camps. Should power be centralized or distributed? What role should the federal government play versus the states? These weren't abstract debates. They were deeply personal beliefs that fueled heated arguments, threatened to paralyze governance, and even jeopardized friendships that had been forged on battlefields. The air was thick with mistrust, and the very fabric of unity seemed to fray. It was a constant struggle to find common ground, to bridge seemingly insurmountable divides, and to remind everyone that despite their differences, they shared a common destiny. The president had to be a unifying force, a voice of reason in a cacophony of dissent, constantly seeking paths toward compromise and understanding, rather than allowing division to fester. Yet, through all these storms, the threat of rebellion, the crushing weight of debt, and the deep chasm of division, our president stood firm. This is where his character truly shone. He possessed immense power, the kind that could easily be abused in times of crisis. He could have silenced dissent with an iron fist, declared martial law, or centralized all authority under himself. Many leaders throughout history have succumbed to such temptations, believing it was the only way to save their nation. But not He understood that true strength wasn't about wielding absolute power, but about upholding the principles upon which the nation was founded. He governed with a profound respect for the rule of law, even when it made his job incredibly difficult. He listened, he debated, he persuaded, and he sought consensus, rather than simply dictating terms. He refused to let personal ambition or the pressures of the moment corrupt his commitment to a government of the people. Beat the people for the people. His actions during these trials set a precedent that echoed through generations. He demonstrated that a leader could be strong without being tyrannical, resolute without being ruthless. He proved that a republic could endure even its darkest days, not by suppressing its people, but by empowering them, by respecting their rights, and by tirelessly working towards a more perfect union. He showed the world that even when faced with overwhelming challenges, a commitment to democratic ideals, and an unwavering belief in the strength of an informed and engaged citizenry could guide a nation through the storm. His leadership during this period wasn't just about solving problems. It was about defining what it meant to be a leader in a republic. It was about proving that the great experiment of self-governance could work, even when the odds seemed stacked against it. It taught us that true leadership isn't about avoiding tough times, but about navigating them with integrity, wisdom, and an unshakable commitment to the greater good. What an incredible lesson, wouldn't you agree? It reminds us that even today, when we face our own trials, the principles of steadfast leadership, respect for law, and dedication to unity are more vital than ever. Thank you so much for joining me today on this journey through history. If you found this chapter as compelling as I did, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel for more deep dives, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think is the most important lesson from this period? I'd love to hear from you. All right, let's dive into a pivotal moment in American history, shall we? You know, sometimes the biggest statements aren't made with grand declarations, but with the quiet courage of knowing when to step aside. And that, my friends, is exactly what we are going to explore today in what we're calling Chapter 16. The Farewell Address. Imagine this. It's 1796. The United States is a young nation, barely 2 decades old since declaring independence. George Washington, the man who led them through a revolution and then steered the ship of state as its very first president, is at the height of his influence. Everyone, and I mean asterisk, everyone asterisk, expects him to run for a 3rd term. It was almost a given. He was revered, established. He was the bedrock. But Washington, being Washington, had other plans that would, once again, absolutely shock the world. He announced he would not seek a 3rd term. Just let that sink in for a moment. In an era where leaders often clung to power for life, or for as long as they could, Washington chose a different path. This wasn't just a political decision. It was a profound statement about the nature of the American Republic and the principles he believed it should embody. It sent ripples, tidal waves, through the political landscape. People were stunned. Some were relieved. Others were deeply concerned about the future without his steady hand. But what drove this extraordinary decision? It wasn't a sudden impulse. Washington had been contemplating this for years, even after his first term. He felt the weight of the office, the demands on his health, and a deep desire to return to his beloved Mount Vernon. More importantly, he believed that a peaceful transition of power, a voluntary relinquishing of it, was essential to setting a precedent for a truly Republican government. He understood that a leader, no matter how beloved, should not become indispensable. He knew that the strength of the nation lay in its institutions, not in any single individual. So, in September of 1796, Washington chose to communicate his decision not through a fiery speech or a public rally, but through a meticulously crafted letter. This wasn't just a resignation. It was a final, profound piece of advice to the American people, a blueprint for the future, penned with the help of James Madison and Alexander Hamilton. It was published in the American Daily Advertiser and quickly reprinted across the nascent nation. And this, my friends, is where the farewell address truly becomes an enduring testament to his vision. This letter wasn't just a polite goodbye. It was a stark warning, delivered with the gravitas of a founding father imparting his dying wisdom. He looked into the future and saw potential pitfalls. dangers that could unravel the very fabric of the Union he had fought so hard to create. He laid out 3 primary warnings, pillars of concern that resonate just as powerfully today as they did over 2 centuries ago. First, and perhaps most urgently, Washington warned against the dangers of asterisk. He spoke passionately about the importance of national unity, urging Americans to cherish it above all else. He saw emerging factions, regional rivalries, and partisan animosities already threatening to pull the young country apart. He understood that a house divided against itself cannot stand, and he implored his countrymen to rise above narrow self-interest and geographic loyalties. He stressed that a common name, American, was far more important than any local distinction. He feared that these internal divisions, if left unchecked, would weaken the nation, making it vulnerable both internally and to external manipulation. His words were a plea for solidarity, for shared purpose, for recognizing that their collective strength lay in their ability to overcome their differences and work together. Secondly, and closely tied to his concern about division, he issued a stern caution against the rise of asterisk political parties. Asterisk. Now, this might sound ironic to us today, living in a world dominated by party politics, but Washington viewed partisan spirit as a dangerous force, capable of tearing society aside. He saw parties as potentially leading to frightful despotism, creating animosity, and even opening the door to foreign influence. He believed that the spirit of party, fueled by ambition and rivalry, could distract government from its true purpose, serving the people, and instead turn it into a battleground for power. He worried that parties would prioritize their own success over the national good, fostering a spirit of revenge and retaliation that would ultimately undermine good governance and the very principles of democracy. He wasn't naive. He knew human nature made parties almost inevitable, but he urged vigilance against their potential excesses, calling them the worst enemies of popular government. And finally, Washington's 3rd major warning was about asterisk foreign entanglements. Asterisk. He urged the United States to steer clear of permanent alliances and intense hostilities with other nations. He advocated for a policy of neutrality, believing that America's best course was to focus on its own development and stability, rather than getting drawn into the perpetual conflicts of Europe. He cautioned against allowing passionate attachments or resentments towards other countries to dictate American policy. He saw that such entanglements could embroil the nation in wars that were not its own, drain its resources, and compromise its independence. He promoted the idea of commercial relations with all nations, but political connections with none, famously saying, "Our true policy is to steer clear of permanent alliances with any portion of the foreign world." This wasn't isolationism in the sense of withdrawing from the world, but rather a pragmatic approach designed to protect the young nation's sovereignty and allow it to mature without external pressures. So, this farewell address wasn't just a historical document. It was a prophetic blueprint. Washington's decision to step down, and the wisdom he imparted in that letter, established crucial precedents for American democracy. It demonstrated that leadership was about service, not dominion. It solidified the idea of a limited presidency and the peaceful transfer of power, and his warnings about unity, partisan excess, and foreign policy have echoed through American history, debated and reinterpreted by every generation of leaders. His act of willingly ceding power was revolutionary in itself, setting a standard that future presidents, at least for a time, would largely follow. It underscored his belief that the office was greater than the man, and that the principles of the Republic must always come first. The farewell address is a powerful reminder that sometimes the greatest act of leadership is knowing when and how to leave, and to leave behind not just a legacy, but a guiding vision for those who follow. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through such a pivotal moment in history. If you found this insightful, please hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. What do you think about Washington's warnings today? Do they still resonate? We love hearing from you. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into a cornerstone of American democracy. Something so fundamental yet often overlooked, the peaceful transfer of power. Specifically, we're looking at Chapter 17, which truly highlights the very first time this incredible act unfolded in American history. It's a story of profound importance, a moment that didn't just happen, but but was carefully orchestrated and deeply understood by the people involved. Think about it. Before the United States, how did leadership usually change hands? Often through conflict, rebellion, or even succession by birthright. But here, a young republic, fresh off a revolution, was about to set a precedent that would shape its future and inspire nations worldwide. This wasn't just a political maneuver. It was a philosophical statement, a declaration of faith in the system they had painstakingly built. This first transition, which took place in 1797, saw President George Washington step down and John Adams ascend to the presidency. It was a moment laden with significance, not just because it was the first, but because it established a tradition of respecting electoral outcomes and the will of the people, even when political rivalries ran deep. Washington, the revered general and the nation's first leader, could have easily clung to power. His popularity was immense, his influence undeniable. Yet, he chose a different path, a path of service, then retirement. His farewell address, a masterpiece of statesmanship, urged unity and warned against factionalism, setting the stage for his voluntary departure. His decision to voluntarily relinquish power was nothing short of revolutionary. It wasn't just a simple act. It was a powerful message to both the American people and the world. It declared that in this new nation, leaders served the people, not themselves. It cemented the idea that the presidency was an office, not a crown. This single act of humility and foresight provided the bedrock for democratic governance. It showed that the principles enshrined in their Constitution were not just words on parchment, but living, breathing ideals that could withstand the test of power. Then came John Adams. His inauguration wasn't just a ceremony. It was a validation of the democratic process. Despite significant political differences and a highly contested election, a stark reminder that political tensions are not new. The transfer of authority was seamless. Washington was there, not just as an observer, but as a participant, a silent endorsement of the incoming administration. This physical presence, the visual handover of the reins of power from one democratically elected leader to another, spoke volumes. It was a masterclass in civic duty and mutual respect, even among political adversaries. This dignified transition did more than just change who sat in the Oval Office. It cemented democracy's foundation. It showed that the system worked, that the mechanisms for succession were robust, and that the rule of law was paramount. It demonstrated a collective belief in the Constitution and the institutions it created. This wasn't an easy feat. The young nation was still fragile, its future uncertain. The stakes were incredibly high. But by successfully navigating this crucial moment, they solidified the very essence of American governance. Consider the immense pressure on these early leaders. They were charting new territory, establishing norms that would echo through centuries. Every decision, every action, carried monumental weight. The peaceful transfer of power wasn't just a legal requirement. It was a moral imperative, a commitment to the vision of a self-governing people. It taught future generations that even in the face of deep partisan divides, the system must endure, and the peaceful transition of leadership must always prevail. So, why is this chapter, this first peaceful transfer of power, so critically important? Because it established a fundamental expectation. It set a standard that every president since has been expected to uphold. It reminds us that our democracy isn't guaranteed. It's maintained by our shared commitment to these foundational principles. It's a testament to the strength of institutions over individuals and the power of tradition in upholding freedom. It's a reminder that true leadership means knowing when to step aside, allowing the democratic process to continue its vital work. This historical moment sends a powerful message that resonates even today. Despite our differences, the integrity of our democratic process and the peaceful transition of leadership are non-negotiable. They are the oxygen that keeps the flame of liberty burning bright. This historical precedent is not just a dusty page in a textbook. It's a living principle that continues to guide and protect our nation. I hope this deep dive into Chapter 17 has given you a new appreciation for the incredible foresight and dedication of America's founders. It's a story that truly exemplifies the strength and resilience of democratic ideals. If you enjoyed learning about this pivotal moment in history, please give this video a thumbs up. Your support helps us create more content like this. Don't forget to hit that subscribe button and ring the notification bell so you don't miss our next chapter in American history. Thanks so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Hey everyone, and welcome back to our journey through history. We're diving into chapter 18 today. A truly pivotal and incredibly inspiring moment. The farmer returns. You know, after years of leading armies, forging a nation, and navigating the treacherous waters of early American politics, George Washington did something utterly remarkable, something that truly set him apart in the annals of history. He simply went home. Imagine that for a moment. After achieving the kind of power and reverence most leaders could only dream of, after successfully guiding a fledgling nation through its infancy, Washington could have easily held on to the reins. The people adored him. Many would have supported him staying on indefinitely. But that wasn't his vision for America, nor for himself. His vision was a republic, built on the principles of civilian leadership, where power was temporary and always returned to the people. And to embody that ideal, he knew he had to lead by example. So, in 1783, after the signing of the Treaty of Paris officially ended the Revolutionary War, Washington resigned his commission as Commander-in-Chief of the Continental Army. It was a moment that sent shockwaves across the globe, a truly unprecedented act for a victorious general. Instead of parading in triumph or seeking further political accolades, he bid farewell to his officers and journeyed back to his beloved Mount Vernon. Can you picture it? The quiet return to his estate, a stark contrast to the thunder of cannons and the clamor of war councils. Mount Vernon wasn't just a home. It was his sanctuary, his passion project, and a deeply symbolic representation of the life he truly yearned for. For Washington, farming was more than just a livelihood. It was a philosophical pursuit, a connection to the land and the very idea of self-sufficiency and independence that America was founded upon. He wasn't just a gentleman farmer, he was an innovator. Washington approached agriculture with the same meticulous planning and strategic thinking he applied to military campaigns. He experimented with crop rotation, introduced new farming techniques, and worked tirelessly to improve the productivity of his lands. He kept detailed records, always seeking better ways to cultivate the soil and manage his vast estate. It was a hands-on commitment, often waking before dawn, riding across his fields, and overseeing every aspect of his operations. This wasn't retirement in the modern sense. It was a vigorous, active engagement with the land. This period at Mount Vernon cemented his image as the citizen leader. It wasn't just about stepping away from power. It was about demonstrating that true leadership wasn't about holding on to authority, but about serving the public good and then, crucially, returning to civilian life. He understood that a healthy republic needed citizens, not just rulers. He believed that the strength of the nation lay in its people, in their industry, their virtue, and their willingness to participate in the civic life without craving perpetual power. His neighbors, his family, and even visitors from afar saw him as a man deeply rooted in his community, engaged in the day-to-day realities of life, rather than some distant, unreachable figure. This groundedness was precisely what made him so revered. He was seen as a man of the people, despite his extraordinary achievements and dignified bearing. He wasn't above the common toil, imbras, Italiano. Of course, this quiet period wouldn't last forever. The young nation faced new challenges, and the weaknesses of the Articles of Confederation became glaringly apparent. Washington, though reluctant to leave his cherished farm, felt an undeniable call to duty once more. But even when he later returned to public service, eventually becoming the first president of the United States, his Mount Vernon years profoundly shaped his leadership. His time as a farmer reinforced his understanding of the practical concerns of the American people, the importance of economic stability, and the need for a strong, yet limited, central government. It was this deep connection to the land and the life of a private citizen that made him such a trustworthy and principled leader. He wasn't seeking personal gain or glory. He genuinely sought to secure the future of the republic he had helped birth. His willingness to relinquish power, not once but twice, first as commander of the army and later as president, set a monumental precedent for future American leaders. It established a fundamental principle of American democracy, that power resides with the people, and those who lead do so by their consent. And for a limited time, it showed the world that a republic could indeed thrive, led by individuals who prioritized civic duty over personal ambition. So, The Farmer Returns isn't just a chapter title. It's a profound statement about character, principle, and the very soul of a nascent nation. It asks about the quiet strength of a man who understood that true greatness is unmeasured by how long you hold power, but by how wisely and virtuously you wield it, and ultimately by your willingness to let it go. It's a powerful lesson for us even today. What an incredible story of humility and commitment, right? It really makes you think about what true leadership looks like. Thank you so much for joining me on this historical adventure. If you found this as inspiring as I did, please hit that like button. Subscribe to the channel for more deep dives into history. And let me know in the comments below what you find most fascinating about George Washington's return to Mount Vernon. Your support helps us keep exploring these incredible stories together. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving deep into a pivotal moment in history. One that might just be the most underrated yet profoundly impactful decision ever made by an American leader. We're talking about Chapter 19. The Legacy of Refusal. This isn't just a story. It's the very bedrock of what America was meant to be, and it continues to echo through time, shaping our democracy even today. Imagine this: a nation newly forged in the fires of revolution, its destiny hanging precariously in the balance. The war is won, but the future is uncertain. There's a charismatic, universally admired leader, a man who could easily have seized ultimate power. He had the army's loyalty, the people's adoration, and the momentum to declare himself ruler for life, perhaps even establish a dynasty. Every precedent from history, every temptation of power, pointed him towards a crown. Yet, he said no. This wasn't just a simple rejection of a title. It was a profound act of self-denial, a deliberate stepping back from the precipice of absolute power. George Washington, the victorious general, the father of his country, chose to return to his farm at Mount Vernon. He chose citizenship over monarchy, service over sovereignty, and in doing so, he etched an indelible mark on the soul of a nascent nation. His refusal of kingship wasn't just a personal choice. It was a revolutionary act that forever defined the American experiment. Why was this refusal so critical? Well, think about the world at that time. Monarchies were the norm. Kings, queens, emperors, they ruled by divine right or military might. The idea of a victorious general voluntarily relinquishing power and returning to civilian life was almost unheard of. It sent a clear, thunderous message to both the American people and the world. This new nation would not follow the old, tyrannical paths. It would be different. It would be a republic, governed by laws, not by men. Especially, not by one man. This single act established a fundamental principle. Power in America flows from the people, and it is temporary. No one, not even the greatest hero, is above the law or beyond the reach of democratic accountability. It enshrined the idea that leadership is a trust, not an inheritance, and that the ultimate authority resides in the Constitution and the will of the citizens, expressed through their elected representatives. The impact of this legacy of refusal is truly staggering. It became the cornerstone, the very blueprint for American democracy. Every president since Washington has, by taking the oath of office and then peacefully transferring power, reaffirmed this foundational principle. It's not just a ritual. It's a living testament to that original refusal and the inspiration drawn from this act. It's immense. Let's fast forward to some of America's most challenging moments, and you'll see Washington's shadow, his spirit of refusal, guiding future leaders. Take Abraham Lincoln, for instance. During the darkest hours of the Civil War, when the Union was on the brink of collapse, Lincoln faced immense pressure, criticism, and the weight of a divided nation. He could have been tempted to overstep his authority, to rule by decree, to preserve the Union at any cost to democratic norms, but he didn't. Lincoln consistently referred to the founding principles, to the idea of a government of the people. By the people, for the people, his struggle was to preserve the Union and its republican form of government, not to replace one form of tyranny with another. His actions, his measured leadership, and ultimately his commitment to restoring the nation under its original democratic ideals directly echoed Washington's self-restraint. Lincoln understood that saving the Union wasn't just about winning battles. It was about upholding the very principles that Washington had established, including the peaceful transfer of power and the supremacy of the Constitution. Then consider Franklin Delano Roosevelt. Leading the nation through the Great Depression and World War II, FDR served an unprecedented 4 terms as president. This unprecedented tenure itself sparked debates about the limits of presidential power. Yet, despite the immense challenges and the global threat of totalitarianism, FDR never sought to dismantle democratic institutions or consolidate power indefinitely. His leadership, while strong and decisive, always operated within the framework of the Constitution, respecting the balance of power and the eventual need for democratic elections. The very fact that the 22nd Amendment limiting presidents to 2 terms was ratified after his presidency speaks volumes about the enduring importance of Washington's initial refusal, a refusal that eventually enshrined term limits as a permanent feature of American democracy, reinforcing the idea that no single person should hold power for too long. This legacy isn't just about grand gestures. It's about the subtle but profound ways it shapes our civic discourse. It reminds us that leadership is a stewardship, not an entitlement. It teaches us the importance of humility and power, the value of restraint, and the ultimate supremacy of the rule of law over any individual's ambition. When leaders today grapple with difficult decisions, when they face calls to bypass democratic processes, Washington's ghost, the spirit of his refusal, stands as a quiet but firm reminder of the path not taken and the path that must be taken. It's about understanding that the strength of our democracy isn't just in its institutions, but in the willingness of its leaders to uphold those institutions, even when it means sacrificing personal power or popularity. It's about the constant renewal of that initial promise, that America would be a nation where the people rule, not a king. So, the next time you think about American history, don't just remember the battles won or the documents signed. Remember the quieter, perhaps more profound, act of refusal. Remember George Washington, who could have been king, but chose to be a citizen. In that choice, he gave us more than just a republic. He gave us a legacy of democratic virtue, a beacon that continues to guide us. This legacy reminds us that true power lies not in seizing control, but in upholding principles. It's a powerful lesson, not just for leaders, but for every one of us as citizens, to cherish and protect the foundations of our democratic experiment. Thank you so much for joining me on this journey through history. If you found this discussion thought-provoking, please hit that like button, share it with your friends, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next chapter. Your support helps us keep exploring these incredible stories that shape our world. See you next time. Hey everyone, and welcome back to the channel. Today, we're diving into chapter 20 of our journey. A chapter so pivotal, so profound. It's titled, The Man Who Could Have Been King. Grab your favorite beverage, settle in, because this isn't just history. It's a story about the very soul of a nation. Imagine this. The American Revolution is over. The dust has settled. The British are gone, and victory is sweet. But victory, as it often does, brings its own set of challenges. The fledgling United States is fragile, teetering on the brink. There's a power vacuum, uncertainty, and a palpable sense of anxiety about what comes next. And in the center of it all stands one man, a figure of immense prestige and unparalleled respect. George Washington. He's not just a general. He's the architect of independence, the hero who led a ragtag army to victory against the most powerful empire in the world. He's revered, almost worshipped, by his soldiers and the populace alike. If anyone could seize absolute power, declare himself ruler, and found a dynasty, it was Washington. The historical precedents were all there. Look at Caesar. Look at Cromwell. Strong leaders, emerging from chaos, stepping into the role of permanent ruler. Many expected it. Some even quietly hoped for it, believing a strong hand was exactly what the chaotic young republic needed. But here's where Washington steps onto a different path, one that would redefine leadership for centuries to come. He understood the immense weight of the moment, the crossroads at which America stood. He knew that the revolution wasn't just about throwing off a king. It was about building something entirely new, something based on the ideals of liberty and self-governance, and he knew that if he were to become king, he would betray every principle for which they had fought. Let's rewind a bit to 1783, shortly after the Treaty of Paris. The Continental Army, still encamped in Newburgh, New York, was restless. Congress, under the Articles of Confederation, was weak and couldn't pay the soldiers who had sacrificed so much. There was growing resentment, whispers of mutiny, even talk of using military force to compel Congress to act. This was the Newburgh Conspiracy, a moment of extreme peril for the young nation. So many officers, frustrated and desperate, even suggested to Washington that he should take control, perhaps even establish a monarchy. They saw him as their salvation. Washington could have easily fueled these sentiments, could have positioned himself as the strong man needed to restore order. But what did he do instead? He called a meeting of his officers. He entered the room, pulled out a letter, and began to read. But his eyesight was failing, and he fumbled with his spectacles. He famously said, "Gentlemen, you must pardon me. I have grown gray in your service, and now find myself growing blind." That simple, human gesture, that moment of vulnerability, disarmed everyone. It reminded them of the sacrifices they had all made together. He then delivered a powerful, moving speech, urging them to remain steadfast in their commitment to Republican ideals, to trust in the civilian government, and to reject any actions that would stain the honor of their cause. He appealed to their patriotism, their belief in the principles they had fought for, and just like that, the conspiracy crumbled. Washington's moral authority, his unwavering commitment to republicanism, diffused a crisis that could have easily led to a military dictatorship. This was not a singular event. Throughout his military career, Washington consistently demonstrated a commitment to civilian control and the rule of law, even when it was difficult or unpopular. He wasn't driven by personal ambition in the traditional sense. His ambition was for the success of the American experiment, for the establishment of a free society. Then came another pivotal moment: his resignation as Commander-in-Chief. On December 23, 1783, in Annapolis, Maryland, Washington appeared before Congress. The world watched, expecting perhaps another Caesar, another powerful general consolidating his power. Instead, with simple, profound dignity, he surrendered his commission. He thanked Congress for their confidence, wished them well, and then, most crucially, declared his intention to retire to private life at Mount Vernon. Imagine the shock, the AOW, the sheer revolutionary nature of this act. A victorious general, at the height of his power, voluntarily relinquishing it. It was unprecedented in modern history. It sent a clear message. In America, power resided with the people and their elected representatives, not with a military leader. It cemented the principle of civilian supremacy over the military, a cornerstone of American democracy. This act resonated across the globe. King George III himself, when told that Washington intended to return to his farm, reportedly remarked, "If he does that, he will be the greatest man in the world." And indeed, he was. By stepping away from power, Washington showed the world that true leadership wasn't about holding on to authority, but about upholding principles. He set a powerful precedent for future leaders, demonstrating that the presidency was not a crown to be seized, but a trust to be served and then returned. Of course, his retirement wasn't forever. He was called back to serve as president of the Constitutional Convention, and then, reluctantly, as the first president of the United States. Even then, his actions continued to reinforce his commitment to limited government and the transfer of power. He voluntarily stepped down after 2 terms, establishing another crucial precedent that would shape American democracy for over a century and a half. He could have easily served for life. Many wanted him to, but he chose not to. So, why is this so important? Because in a world accustomed to monarchs, despots, and endless power struggles, Washington's choice offered a new vision. It demonstrated that a nation could be founded and sustained on principles of liberty and self-government, rather than the dictates of a single ruler. He consciously chose to be a temporary leader, a servant of the people, rather than a permanent sovereign. This legacy echoes today. It's why we have elections, why presidents have term limits, and why the military remains subservient to civilian authority. It's a constant reminder that the power of the people is supreme, and that those who lead are entrusted with a sacred duty, not a birthright. Washington had the power to become a monarch, to seize absolute control and build a personal empire. But he chose a different path, a path of humility, integrity, and unwavering dedication to the ideals of a free republic. He chose to be a servant of liberty. And that choice, dear friends, that profound and selfless decision, changed the world forever. It laid the bedrock for what America could become and inspired countless movements for freedom across the globe. Thank you so much for joining me on this incredible journey through history. If you found this chapter as inspiring as I did, please hit that like button, share this video with a friend, and don't forget to subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive. Your support means the world. See you next time.